At this point, most of us have heard about the reported dangers of climate change or global warming. Though climate scientists have reached a consensus about the topic, an estimated 97% agree that human actions are accelerating climate change, guidelines that could slow or reverse this process have been slow to be implemented. Alongside the call to action from scientists, a movement of people that outright deny the existence of human-accelerated climate change have also sprung up. Because they deny the very existence of climate change, this movement opposes any action that could be taken to stop or slow down this process. We could spend hours debunking these claims from several different points of view of science, but today I want to focus on the agricultural, biological, and health-related consequences of unencumbered climate change. To begin, we should discuss exactly what is meant by climate change. This phrase describes the long-term shift in temperatures and weather patterns across the globe. Sometimes this change is natural, but since the Industrial Revolution, climate change has been greatly accelerated by human actions. The introduction of fossil fuels like oil, coal, and gas have generated greenhouse gases that coat the earth like a blanket and trap heat. Temperatures have risen approximately 1 degree Celsius in the past 200 years, and the past decade has been the warmest on record. Though 1 degree does not seem like a huge difference, the important thing to note is that 1 degree is an average rise. Regions at the poles of the Earth, like the Arctic, are heating up twice as quickly as regions at the equator, and this is accelerating the ice cap melting and leading to an increase in global sea levels. Weather patterns have also been affected by this process. For example, by the year 2100, high-altitude regions are expected to see a dramatic increase in precipitation, but regions near the equator are expected to experience droughts. Hurricanes are also anticipated to become more destructive as climate change goes unchecked. The fact that climate change is occurring and is being accelerated by human actions is not up for serious debate, and it poses a major risk to life as we know it. Climate change is not the only serious threat that humans are posing to the environment, and other human actions, such as excessive use of pesticides and other pollutants, have had detrimental impacts on the environment as well. Now that we understand what climate change is, we can talk about some of the biological impacts of this process. One major impact that we've already begun to see is a loss of global biodiversity. You may be aware of the ongoing Save the Bees campaign. This movement is aimed at increasing the population of honeybees worldwide. Roughly 80% of all pollination is carried out by honeybees. Food consumed by humans, including several types of fruits, nuts, and vegetables, rely on honeybees to be pollinated and grow more plants. In fact, bees pollinate about 70% of the top 100 food crops in the world, and these crops provide 90% of the world's nutrition. So as you can imagine, it was a big deal when the U.S. National Agricultural Statistics revealed that the bee population in the U.S. had declined by 60% between the years 1948 and 2008. This decline in bee population is largely attributed to the overuse of pesticides and the loss of natural grassland in favor of monocultural farmland. Climate change is also contributing to the decline in bee population. Changes in weather patterns and warming have changed the flowering time of some bee food sources, leaving bees malnourished. Basically, the time that the bee's food source is available and the time that the bee is in a given location is starting to drift apart. Save the Bees has been gaining a lot of attention recently because the continuing decline in bee population poses a threat to natural biodiversity. If bees become extinct, not only will we have lost them, but we could also lose several different food sources like apples and squash that depend on bee pollination. This makes it critical to advocate for programs and policies that prioritize the safety and health of bee populations. Agriculture is also projected to be negatively impacted by the changing climate. Rising temperatures, shifts in weather patterns, and unforeseen major weather events all have the potential to impact food availability. As temperatures climb beyond a crop's optimal temperature, the yield of that crop will decrease. Major weather events could also potentially destroy some of these crops, further decreasing their yield. Extreme weather events also have the potential to impact food delivery, making it more likely that food prices spike in the aftermath of those events. Heat waves will also negatively impact livestock, making them more prone to disease, decreasing their fertility, and decreasing the production of some animal byproducts like eggs or milk. All of these effects have the potential to disrupt food availability and decrease food quality. Of course, bees, livestock, and crops are not the only living things that will be harmed as pollution and climate change get worse. Outside of some of the agricultural impacts I have already discussed, pollution and climate change are projected to have more direct and severe impacts on human health. Particularly, air pollution is projected to get worse as climate change progresses. This type of pollution is caused by an increase in ground-level ozone, which is a key component of smog. It is associated with poor lung function, increased hospitalizations for asthma, and increased rates of premature death. Unlike stratospheric ozone, which forms naturally in the upper atmosphere to protect the Earth from the sun's rays, ground-level ozone forms from chemical reactions involving volatile organic compounds, which are produced from human-made products like cars or power plants. Air pollution is not the only threat to human health posed by climate change. Temperature extremes like heat waves have already been exacerbated by climate change. Heat waves lead to preventable deaths from heat stroke, cardiovascular disease, and cerebrovascular disease. Because urban areas sometimes form heat islands due to the lack of natural land cover like trees or shrubs, they are particularly susceptible to heat waves. Finally, another major threat to human health posed by climate change is disease carried by insects like fleas, mosquitoes, or ticks. Climate change is one factor impacting the seasonal and geographic distribution of these insects. As climate continues to change, these changes can impact the geographic range of some of these disease carriers. These shifts, coupled with changes in how an insect interacts with its new environment, can alter the frequency of insect-borne diseases. It can also introduce new diseases to a particular geographic area depending on how far the insects spread as the climate changes. All of these consequences of global climate change will have dramatic impacts on human health. Coordinated global efforts aimed at slowing climate change and minimizing these effects are necessary to preserve life and protect vulnerable populations. Despite the dangers posed by this process, the worst of them could be minimized or avoided entirely if we began taking decisive action against climate change. Damage done to the planet by climate change is irreversible. However, if policies were put in place to slow climate change, further damage would not be done to the environment. Global temperatures would likely begin to plateau, and after many centuries, they could begin to decrease. Stopping climate change now also has the potential to prevent major losses in ice caps and continued increases in sea levels. Biological impacts would also be mitigated, as slowing the increase in temperature can also slow the agricultural and biodiversity impacts of this process. Additionally, impacts on human health would also be minimized if action were taken against climate change. By reducing carbon emissions through actions like taking public transit or through policies like carbon pricing, and hopefully slowing down these increases in temperatures, problems like heat islands in urban areas could be mitigated and the number of heat-related deaths could be reduced. Stabilizing global climate would also prevent disease vectors from moving into new areas, slowing the spread of diseases carried by them. Finally, reducing pollution levels in major areas will help those with impaired lung function because the air will be cleaner. Despite all of the benefits of action to stop climate change and pollution, very little has been done to stop these processes. I think this is due in part to the effects of climate change feeling very far removed from most people's lives. The people currently living likely are not going to see the most dramatic effects of climate change, and they likely will not be able to see the most significant benefits, like the lowering of global temperatures, of decisive action against the problem either. Because of this, it becomes easy to put climate change on the back burner to solve more imminent problems. However, this ignores that people alive today are already dealing with the consequences of pollution, like people living in urban areas dealing with smog, or those that do not have access to clean water. Taking action to prevent further pollution would greatly benefit these groups. Action against climate change would also have short-term drawbacks for the average person as well, like increasing the prices of fuel or other goods. Though this would impact many people's day-to-day lives and would provide challenges for a lot of people, avoiding the worst effects of climate change and protecting future generations from this process would be well worth it.